This morning, I have some words to share with you about this traditional, treasured ritual. It's called, as I mentioned, the Flower Festival, the Flower Ceremony, and perhaps most commonly, the Flower Communion. Some of you know this ritual, which we'll take part in just a moment. It comes to us from Mája and Norbert Čapek, and this year celebrates its centenary, the 100th anniversary of the blessing of the flowers. Now, in honor of that history and doing honor to our own, I'd like to read the reflections of my predecessor, the Reverend Lindsay Bates, on the story of the two ministers who brought us this gift of flowers. And then we will do our ceremony. So history, illuminated by history. It seems pretty interesting to do this morning. So Reverend Lindsay's words, which I've edited only very slightly here, were part of a shared worship service in this congregation back in 1999. She wrote, "I'll start with Norbert because he was born first on June 3rd, 1870, into a devout Roman Catholic family in Bohemia, in what is now the Czech Republic. He was the son of a tailor and the nephew of a tailor, and his relatives hoped that he would one day take over part of the family business. Unfortunately for the family's plans, however, young Norbert was more interested in the study of the scriptures than the setting of a sleeve. And while studying in Vienna, he converted from Catholicism to the Baptist faith. This did not please his Catholic uncle, who gave him the option of returning to the fold or leaving the family. Norbert left the family, and the Baptists happily took him in. He became a Baptist missionary in Budapest and had tremendous success in spite of the slight handicap of being so short he couldn't see over the top of the pulpit. I am pretty sure that this is Reverend Lindsay's favorite part. Eventually, he became the superintendent of all the Baptist churches in Austro-Hungary. He got into some trouble several times over charges of heresy that were placed against him, and placed rightly, to be fair, for he was a wide reader and a confirmed free thinker, and Baptist theology was just not wide enough to enclose him. One version of Čapek's story says that when he was 40 years old, he met a local professor, one Thomas Masaryk, who would one day become the president of Czechoslovakia. Masaryk's American-born wife had been raised a Unitarian, and Masaryk told Čapek that Čapek was also almost certainly a Unitarian. At Masaryk's urging, Čapek wrote to the Boston headquarters of the American Unitarian Association, thinking to start a Unitarian movement in Moravia and Bohemia, but no one answered his letter. So he left the Baptist ministry to become a journalist. In 1914, he attracted the unfavorable attention of his government over a column he wrote predicting the outbreak of war in Europe. Warned that his arrest was imminent, he went to the United States, to the area around New York City and Newark, New Jersey. I agree, it's a really cool story. I love that. He was now 44 years old at this point, but I need to backtrack just a moment. In April of 1888, a child named Mája Čapek was born in Bohemia. She studied at the local convent to become a librarian. Her family emigrated to the United States in 1907 when she was 19 years old. She went to work in the Czech section of the New York Public Library. By 1914, she had become head librarian of that section. A different version of the story, though, has Mája's family knowing Masaryk's Unitarian wife. And Mája herself, by this time, was also a Unitarian. Working in the library, she happened accidentally to meet a fellow Bohemian, Norbert Čapek, and it was she who persuaded him to explore Unitarianism. Different stories, same result. However, all that may have actually happened, the records of the Unitarian Church in Orange, New Jersey show that Norbert and Mája Čapek signed their membership book on January 10th, 1921. The Čapeks began dreaming of founding a Unitarian church in Bohemia as soon as the war was over. The minister of their church, Reverend Hunt, introduced them to Frederick May Elliott, then the president of the AUA, who also then encouraged them to go ahead and do it. The Čapeks then returned to Europe in 1921, 1922. They went to Prague, where they established the Liberal Religious Fellowship in their living room. The fledgling group of about 40 members eventually took the name of the Unitarian Church of Prague, and its membership grew from that small band of 40 to over 5,000. It nurtured the establishment and growth of half a dozen daughter churches throughout the area in other cities. I know, it's a big change. That early Prague congregation was an odd assortment of former Catholics, Protestants, Jews, theists and agnostics and atheists, free thinkers and renegades, who were all highly suspicious of anything churchy. The fellowship's worship was always a very simple format. Čapek himself wore a business suit rather than a robe, avoiding anything that would be seen as priestly or clerical. Because so many hymns were sect-specific, clearly Catholic or Protestant or Jewish, and therefore unacceptable to 2/3 of his congregation, Čapek himself then wrote 250 of his own for the congregation to sing. Many of those you will find in your gray hymnal. The flower communion was introduced early in the Prague ministry in June of 1923. That is 100 years ago next month. The Čapeks designed that service very carefully as a way of blending and unifying that extremely diverse congregation with a ritual that would offend no one's sensitivities, but would then lift up instead and celebrate also the blessings of their own diversity. The symbolism of the treasury of grace is what I called it, treasury of grace. It's not complicated. As with any good symbol, it is beautiful in its own right and reasonably transparent to the understanding. The flowers represented first and most obviously the beauty and bounty of the natural world, the one world shared by all people. Being all different but gathered into one treasury of grace, the flowers together became a symbol of unity in diversity, of a whole made greater and more beautiful by and because of the variety of its parts. Each participant chose and added their own flower to the treasury. It was extremely important that each flower be put in by the one who had chosen and brought it. This was to remind everyone of the importance of the freely gathered community in which all who were present were there by choice, not by fear or by coercion. And finally, in the closing of the service and selecting a flower each person was to take from the basket, the communion reminds us that we must not only give freely, but also receive. The treasury of grace, which is the treasury of all living, is made rich and beautiful and strong only by our willingness to give ourselves to it. It is made effective, made powerful only by our equal willingness to receive. Now, the ceremony isn't really about the flowers. It's about you. It's about being human in community. We are the treasury of grace, giving and receiving willingly and joyfully, united in diversity, gathered in a free and shared commitment to the community of love and justice and peace. Norbert Čapek presided over no more than 18 celebrations of the flower communion. He was an outspoken critic of all forms of tyranny, and the Nazis from the very beginning watched him closely. In 1940, Mája was traveling in the United States, raising funds for the Prague ministry. The war prevented her return to Prague, but word eventually reached her that both her husband and their daughter Zora had been arrested by the Nazis in 1941. Happily, Zora was released after a year's imprisonment. Norbert, though, was sent to Dachau, where he died at the end of October in 1942. He was 72 years old. The flower communion itself as a ceremony was introduced to us, to the United States, in 1940 by Mája. She led that first celebration at First Parish in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it continues in various forms and adaptations in our Unitarian Universalist societies, a memorial to the Čapek's determination and courage, a reminder each spring that we all have a part in the ongoing creation of life's treasury of grace. Without each of you, without each individual freely bringing your own special gifts, gladly sharing the gifts that others have brought, these baskets, our vases, would remain empty indeed. Think of the hand that chose this flower, that it might now sit in your hand. Note the color and the shape and the way that the light falls on it. For this gift and the community that gave it life and brought it to you, we give thanks. The prayer of consecration was used by Dr. Norbert Čapek at the first flower communion back in 1923. So please join me in the attitude of reverence. In the name of Providence, which implants in the seed the future of the tree, and in the hearts of each person the longing for all people to live in harmony and love, in the name of the highest, in whom we move and who makes each what they are, in the name of the sages and the great religious leaders who sacrificed their lives to hasten the coming of a world community of peace and justice, let us renew our resolution sincerely to be true family to each other, regardless of any barrier that might separate us from one another. In this holy resolution, may we be strengthened, knowing that we are God's family, knowing that one Spirit, the Spirit of love, unites us, knowing that it is our dream and our striving for a more perfect and joyful life that leads us ever on. Amen.
Visit us at UUSG.org.